Interrupt for question time. Senator Cormann.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was about to announce a ministerial absence, but I see that my friend and colleague, Minister Payne, is able to make it.
Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is for the Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck. Can the minister explain on what legal basis former Minister McKenzie undertook an approval role in the Community Sport Infrastructure Grant Program?
The Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks, Senator Wong, for her question. This matter is a matter that was raised in the Auditor-General's report. He raised the question of legality of the ministerial approval for decision-making. And as the Prime Minister noted last Sunday, having consulted with the AGS in the preparation of this advice, he, the Attorney-General, considers that the Auditor-General's assumption arising out of his apparent interpretation of Section 11 of the Australian Sports Commission Act is, as he notes with respect, not correct.
Senator Wong, a supplementary question.
The scathing independent Auditor-General's report states, and I quote, "There are no records evidencing..."
Order. I've got a sense I need to be able to hear the specifics of this question. Senator Wong.
The scathing independent Auditor-General's report states there are no records evidencing that the minister was advised of the legal basis on which the minister could undertake an approval role, and it is not evident to the ANAO what the legal authority was. On what legal basis did Minister McKenzie override the recommendations of Sports Australia? Senator
Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Thanks, Senator Wong, for the supplementary question. I refer it to my previous answer.
Senator Wong, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Has this minister or his office been advised at any stage by Sport Australia as to the legal basis of his predecessor's funding decisions?
Senator Colbeck.
Thanks, Mr. President. I thank Senator Wong for the question. The Prime Minister sought advice from the Attorney-General.
Senator Wong, on a point of order.
Mr. President, direct relevance. The question is about the advice to this minister. It is not about advice to the Prime Minister, and I accept that there are broader issues, but I am not canvassing those. I'm asking what advice this minister got.
I take the point. It was a specific question. I'm going to let the minister complete a sentence or two before I rule on direct relevance. I don't think he got through one then. I'll call the minister to continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given the interest in this issue, the Prime Minister, on behalf of the government, asked the Attorney-General for advice, which I've just provided to the chamber.
Order. Senator Wong, on a point of order.
Direct relevance. The question is not about the Prime Minister's request to the Attorney-General. The question is very direct to this minister in his portfolio responsibilities, what advice he received from a portfolio agency.
Senator Colbeck, have you completed your answer? He's completed his answer. I allowed Senator Wong to continue with the point of order because I wasn't sure of that. I'll call order on my left. I called for order during a question. Order. I urge senators to be careful about the words they use if they're addressing other senators. I didn't catch that as a reflection on a senator, but we don't want to get too close. Senator Abetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually have a public interest and policy question to the minister representing the Minister for Health.
Order.
Can the minister update the Senate?
Order.
It's interesting Labor's not interested in those type of questions, but my question is, can the minister update the Senate on the precautions and steps the Morrison government is taking to keep Australians safe in the wake of the coronavirus health emergency?
The minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Senator Abetz for the opportunity to provide an update on the coronavirus and the Australian protective and precautionary response. Mr. President, as a government, our priority at this time is to protect Australians, to protect their health and to keep them safe. The government is taking action to ensure that we assist Australians whilst keeping our community safe. We took early and decisive action which was based on the latest and best medical advice. We have mobilised the National Incident Centre. We have activated the National Medical Stockpile to provide protective masks to GPs and to frontline workers. The National Trauma Centre has been mobilised, and we are providing AUSMAT assistance to those who have returned on the chartered flight out of Wuhan and are now on Christmas Island. As of this morning, there have been 28,261 confirmed cases of the coronavirus worldwide, and sadly, we have seen 565 people lose their lives as a result of the virus or its complications. Australia has 14 confirmed cases, 2 in South Australia, 4 in Queensland, 4 in Victoria and 4 in New South Wales. Other suspected cases are being tested and kept in isolation. We have seen promising signs of 3 Australians who have had the virus being cleared and discharged after significant testing. It is encouraging and important that patients are clearing the virus and being discharged. This is a significant milestone. The government will continue to keep the Australian people updated about this matter and how we are working to protect them.
Senator Betts, a supplementary question.
I thank the Minister for that extensive answer and ask what actions has the government taken to ensure this level of preparedness?
Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President. Our response has been through and with prompt border isolation, surveillance and contact tracing mechanisms already in place. We have acted early to provide Australia the best protection possible from this virus. Minister Hunt convened meetings of all health ministers and their chief officers on the 25th of January and the 2nd of February 2020, and on the 1st of February the Prime Minister announced strict new travel restrictions on the advice of the Australian Health Protection Principal Committee. On the 30th of January, the World Health Organisation declared the 2019 coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. In response to this declaration, the Chief Medical Officer was able to advise that Australia was already carrying out the activities recommended by the WHO, with border isolation surveillance and contact tracing mechanisms already in place.
Senator Abetz, a final supplementary question.
As a committed federalist, I ask what further steps is the government taking to work with state governments to ensure the most effective response possible to combat this virus?
Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President. All state and territory governments are involved in the response with daily meetings of Commonwealth and state and territory officials. The Australian Health Protection Principal Committee is meeting daily to provide expert medical advice to government, which is assisting in informing Australia's response. This membership includes all federal, state and territory chief medical officers. A humanitarian flight which has successfully brought people to quarantine, and the upgrading of our quarantining arrangements. We thank all of those who have led this at the medical level. We thank the Chinese government for its cooperation, and for those across the chamber and in state governments who are helping provide information, assistance and reassurance to Australians at this time. Our message to the Australian people is we are prepared, we are acting and we will get through this. We will continue to act on the latest and best medical advice.
Senator Farrell.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck. Has the minister seen any spreadsheet listing funding applications under the Community Sports Infrastructure Program that are colour-coded and focusing on applications from marginal electorates held by the Coalition, as well as electorates to be targeted by the Coalition?
Minister for Youth and Sport, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Yes, I've seen some public documents that have been demonstrated by, put in partially into the public forum by the ABC. I'm aware of a number of other documents that have been utilised in the assessment of this process, but I've not spent time looking at them all. I haven't seen specifically. And as I said yesterday, I can't verify the document that has been partially released by the ABC because I actually don't have access to it.
Senator Farrell, a supplementary question.
Yes, I do have one. Thank you, Mr President. The Independent Auditor General's report states that, and I quote, records examined by the ANAO evidence that the Minister's office used the spreadsheets provided to it by Sport Australia with additional analysis on marginal electorates held by the Coalition, as well as those electorates not held by the Coalition that were to be targeted in the 2019 election. Has the Minister seen the analysis undertaken by the former Minister's office?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I thank Senator Farrell for the question. No, I haven't seen that analysis.
Senator Farrell.
I have a further question. Thank you, President. Has the Minister at any point been briefed by his agencies about concerns with the former Minister's handling of the Community Sport Infrastructure Program? If yes, when and by whom was he first briefed?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. And Mr President, and thanks Senator Farrell for the question. When I came to the portfolio, this program was in the delivery phase. All of the allocation of projects had been completed, and so my concern through the process of this particular program has been to ensure the delivery of grants that had been allocated and signed off, and of course then progress through the system.
Senator Wong, on a point of order. Senator Wong, on a point of order.
Direct relevance, and perhaps the minister will get there. But this is the second time he's been asked directly about matters within his portfolio. We are asking not about other matters. We are asking whether he was briefed by agencies in his portfolio expressing concern about the former minister's handling of this program.
I've allowed you to restate the question, Senator Wong. The minister's been speaking for 30 seconds and he's heard you remind him of it. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, and thanks Senator Wong for the point of order. My next line was going to be, Mr President, that my first awareness of the issues that were raised by the ANAO report was when I received the ANAO report in the normal course of government receiving the report.
Senator Waters. Senator Waters.
Sorry, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister. The human cost and the environmental cost of the fires is immense. The economic cost is over $100 billion. Australia's largest coal companies earned over $50 billion in the last 5 years, and they paid no income tax. When is this government going to levy coal companies to pay for disaster prevention and clean-up, including doubling the numbers of our paid firefighters, so that the polluters who are causing this problem help pay to fix it?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Under our tax system, companies pay a tax on their profits, and of course the our tax laws do not discriminate between individual companies on any basis other than how much profit they generate in a particular year. And of course, as you would be aware, in Australia under our laws, any company with a turnover of up to $50 million will eventually pay 25% tax on their profits, and any company with profits or with turnover above $50 million will pay 30% tax on their profits. And I mean, that is the way our tax system operates. What I would also just point out again is that the production and export of Australian coal into markets around the world where there is demand for coal helps reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. Because to the extent that we do not supply Australian coal with lower moisture content, lower ash content and higher energy intensity, it would be replaced by coal from other sources, which is more polluting. And I mean, anyone who has got a basic understanding of logic understands that if you replace a comparatively more environmentally efficient energy source with a comparatively more polluting energy source, the overall effect of that is going to be bad for the environment.
Senator Waters on a point of order.
Yeah, thanks, President. Just a point of order. The question went to whether this government will make the polluters pay to clean up the costs of the disaster they are causing, double our firefighters. I'm yet to hear the minister address
Senator
that.
Waters, as I remind senators, a minister is entitled to respond to part of a question. The question contained a lengthy preamble with a number of assertions. The minister can be directly relevant by responding to any, all or part of a question. Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As I've indicated, in Australia, companies pay tax on their profits, and that is obviously appropriate. I think I've addressed the other parts of the question. Obviously, I can also assure Senator Waters that this government does not have any plans whatsoever to reintroduce a Labor Green carbon tax, because we understand it would harm the economy, it would harm the environment,
Order.
and it would leave
Senator
Australians
Cormann,
worse off.
time for the answers expired. Senator Waters, a supplementary question.
Thanks, President. Today, coal company Adani was criminally convicted for false and misleading information about unlawful land clearing. They do have a track record of non-compliance with environmental conditions. Given that former Fire Chief Greg Mullins has said that burning coal is the base cause of the severity of these bushfires, will the government now use its legal power to cancel Adani's mine approval on the basis of this criminal conviction?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As I'm sure Senator Waters would be aware, the project, the Carmichael Mine project, has been thoroughly assessed and reviewed both by federal and state authorities in Queensland. It is being supported and has obtained and secured all of the relevant approvals. It's been supported both by the federal government and by the state Labor government in Queensland. It will not only help create jobs in Queensland, it will also help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, because it will displace more polluting coal that would be coming from other sources. Australian coal helps to reduce emissions when it displaces more polluting coal from other sources, and I would have thought the Greens should come on board and support that effort to help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions.
Senator Waters, the final supplementary question.
Thanks very much, President. The government accepted $500,000 in fossil fuel donations in an election year, the most recent election year. Half of that was from Adani, some of which was donated prior to groundwater approvals being issued, and some of which was donated after those groundwater approvals were issued. Given the climate crisis that we are in, when will you give the money back?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So Senator Waters asked me about donations, and I'm reminded that the single biggest corporate donation ever in the history of the Commonwealth. Where did that go to? Did I go to the Labor Party? No. Did I go to the Liberal Party? No. Did it go to the National Party? No. Did it go to One Nation? No. It went to the Australian Greens. Oh, $1.6 million to the Australian Greens. You are absolute hypocrites.
Order. Order. Senator Sheldon.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann. I refer to Senator Mackenzie's statements to the media on Monday and to the Senate last night, in which she said, and I quote, "I do not accept that those memberships were a conflict of interest, and I do not believe the gifted membership of the Australian Clay Target Association or my paid membership to Field and Game Australia contributed any real or apparent conflict of interest. If Senator Mackenzie is correct, why did she have to resign?"
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think these issues have been canvassed, obviously, over the weekend. As you would be aware, the Prime Minister asked the Secretary of his department to conduct a review into relevant matters, and at the end of that process, based on an undisclosed conflict of interest, which was found to be in breach of ministerial standards, Senator McKenzie offered her resignation. I mean, that's a matter of public record. Now, having said that, I mean, Senator McKenzie did an outstanding job as Minister for Sports, and indeed the programme that she developed was very popular and very successful. And through Senator McKenzie's interventions, appropriately exercising her ministerial discretion, she actually ensured that a higher proportion of electorates represented by Labor members would get project funding. And of course, because under the independent recommendations from Sports Australia, only 26% of the electorates with project funding were Labor electorates, and of course, through Senator McKenzie's intervention, well, I've actually answered the question.
Senator Sheldon, a supplementary question.
Only days after Senator McKenzie resigned her ministry as Deputy Leader of the Nationals because of her role in the corrupt sports rort scheme, Deputy Prime Minister McCormick has said he looks forward to her, and I quote, coming back later on down the track. Does the Prime Minister also support Senator McKenzie's return?
Senator Cormann.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Well, yes, of course. Of course, we agree with the Deputy Prime Minister that, in due course down the track, we would welcome Senator McKenzie back to make a contribution at the highest levels of government. Of course, I mean, Senator McKenzie paid a high price for, for a breach that was identified to the ministerial standards. But of course, there'll be we look forward to the opportunity down the track for Senator McKenzie to make a contribution in government again.
Senator Sheldon, a final supplementary question.
What action has the Prime Minister taken in response to Senator Canavan's admission on Monday of his undisclosed membership of a club for which he approved a $20 million NAIF loan?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As soon as the Prime Minister was informed in relation to this matter, he asked the Minister to update his declaration of private interests, as all ministers are required to do, and of course Senator Canavan has done that. In the case of Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility funding, the decisions are made by the NAIF. The Prime Minister also asked for advice from the Secretary of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet on the matter raised by Senator Canavan, but of course Senator Canavan has since stepped down from the Cabinet for other reasons.
Senator, order. I'd like to call Senator Hanson for her question. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham. As stated on the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment website, it's estimated that 70% of the edible seafood Australians consume is imported predominantly from Asia. The freefall in seafood exports has left the Australian fishing industry on its knees as the coronavirus grips the world and China closes its ports and flights carrying Australian produce. Will the Morrison government invoke a halt to all foreign seafood imports to save the Queensland and Australian fishing industry at this critical time of need, or will you continue to favour overseas fishermen and help drive the final nail into the Australian seafood coffin?
The Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. I thank Senator Hanson for her question and correspondence that she has had with the government on this issue, including discussions that I've had with her. The government is acutely aware of the impact the seafood industry, the tourism industry, many other sectors of Australian industry are facing as a result, in particular, of the downturn in visitation from Asian markets like China and Japan as a result of the coronavirus, as well as the downturn in economic activity and hospitality activities in many of those markets. That's why we're working to make sure that we help those industries to get through this period in terms of trying to activate greater tourism and travel within Australia through our Holiday Here This Year campaign, our investment in the domestic travel sector, as well as our work to make sure that we support them where they are businesses who are export-oriented in the seafood sector to look at alternative markets. And Senator Duniam and I have both met with, held discussions with members of the seafood industry and wrote to the seafood industry yesterday, providing dedicated contact points into Austrade. In relation to imports and exports of Australian seafood and seafood into Australia, there is a significant trade in both directions of seafood, but I would point out that in areas such as live fish, we export $29 million of seafood products and import $5 million. In crustaceans and molluscs, we export $1 billion but import $549 million.
Senator Hanson, on a point of order.
On point of order, my question was directly to: will the minister address the imports? Would the minister address the imports into Australia?
Senator Hanson, you're restating part of the question. It was a lengthy question, and with respect, the minister is being directly relevant to the terms of the question. I ask senators where a minister may be straying. I give them some latitude, but you had a lengthy question. You're restating part of it. I think the minister, with respect, is being directly relevant to the entire question asked. As I've said before, a minister can respond to all or part or any aspect of a question. Senator Birmingham.
And Mr President, the last category I was going to highlight there, live fresh lobsters and crayfish, where Australia exports $739 million of such product but imports nothing at all. It will be important to the long-term viability of those sectors that we keep their export opportunities open, and that means maintaining the type of trade relations with other countries that enable us to do so.
Supplementary question, Senator Hanson.
Does the minister concede that the Morrison government's free trade agreements are prohibiting the protection of Queensland and Australia's seafood and fishing industry?
Senator Birmingham.
No, not at all. Not at all, Mr President. In fact, if I go back to that last figure that I cited, Australia exports $739 million of live fresh lobsters and crayfish, and we import none at all. None at all. So for that part of the seafood industry, it is essential that they have access to other markets. Yes, there's an Australian domestic market, but the markets they have access to overseas are far larger markets, more consumers willing to pay more, creating wealth, business and employment in Australia as a result of those export opportunities. And the same can be said in the live fish sector, around crustaceans and molluscs as well. The opportunities there are very real, and it is why it is important that we continue to create opportunities for those businesses to be able to sell their goods, creating maximum levels of Australian exports. And it's one of the reasons why just today data shows, once again, record levels of trade surplus for Australia as a result in part of our FTAs.
Senator Hanson, final supplementary question.
Minister, the fishing industry have told me personally that they are on their knees. Does the minister recognise the death of the Queensland and Australian fishing industry is imminent if Australia continues to be swamped by cheap seafood imports?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. No, I don't recognise that nor agree with that sentiment. The death of many parts of the Australian fishing industry would occur were we to undertake policy decisions that withdrew their capacity to be able to service their export markets. And in the end, these businesses need, for the long term, to be able to get back into markets when those countries recover and continue to sell premium product at premium prices that enable Australian businesses to employ. Ultimately, our trade agreements are working in Australia's interests. Today's data shows the 2019 trade surplus for Australia, what Australia exported in excess of what we imported, stands at $67.6 billion. It's a record trade surplus for Australia. It comes off the back of month after month after month of record trade surpluses, showing that our export industries are firmly doing the job for Australia and contributing very much to a healthy trade surplus, driven in part by our free trade agreements.
Time for the answers expired. Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister update the Senate on how Defence is supporting the whole-of-government effort to repatriate Australians from coronavirus-affected areas overseas?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and also thank you very much to Senator Henderson for the question, but also for her ongoing support for defence and particularly for defence industry. Yesterday I was very proud to outline to this chamber all the work that the ADF are doing on Operation Bushfire Assist, which is the largest mobilisation of the ADF domestically in our nation's history. I'm also very proud that the ADF has been able to very quickly mobilise and provide very significant support to the whole-of-government efforts on fighting and tackling the coronavirus. These efforts, as Minister Cash has said, are being led by the Departments of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Health and also Home Affairs. But Defence are playing a very significant role in this response. And we are working across governments very well to ensure the best interest of the Australians who have got caught up overseas, particularly in Wuhan. The ADF currently has 236 personnel supporting the departure of Australians from Wuhan, and they're doing what they do best. They are providing a wide range of logistical support, and those things, as I said yesterday, the many things that can be measured by statistics and by quantities and numbers, but they are also providing that support that is not directly measurable. That is providing additional support and that helping hand and that spirit of kindness to the Australians and the families who are returning to Australia.
Senator Henderson, a supplementary question.
Can the minister expand on how Defence is supporting Home Affairs with these efforts, particularly on Christmas Island?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, and again thank you to Senator Henderson for the question. Defence has directly supported Australian Border Force with the transfer of the first two groups of Australians evacuees from Learmonth to Christmas Island. And ADF people are assisting the assisted departure of Australians from Wuhan, as I said, to Christmas Island. 168 personnel are providing direct garrison support at Christmas Island and 49 at RAF Base Learmonth, which is currently being dismantled and relocated to Darwin due to an impending cyclone in the northwest region. There are 19 members who are coordinating this effort, also from ADF headquarters. And Defence support to Home Affairs includes the re-establishment and the operation of the facility at Christmas Island, including the provision of food and many other life essentials and comforts for those who are currently at Christmas Island. The garrison support is also very wide, everything from catering through to decontamination and transport.
Senator Reynolds. Senator Henderson, a final supplementary question.
Can the minister outline to the Senate what further support Defence is prepared to provide?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you. Senator Henderson, in close consultation and collaboration with the other impacted agencies across the federal government, Defence is very closely monitoring the novel coronavirus situation, with a focus now on contingency planning in support of these whole-of-government efforts. And in particular, we're currently focusing further on movements, additional movements of people, and also the stores that might be required to be transported across the country to support this. Support is also still currently underway for the assisted departure of additional Australians, as has been previously reported on the Air New Zealand flight, and any further possible Australian government organised flights. In that sense, we're providing health, logistics and movement staff to ensure detailed planning and support of DFAT Health and ABF should further requirements be of Defence. And can I just say in conclusion, can I thank all of the ADF staff who are so willingly doing this task at the moment. They continue to serve with great distinction on our behalf.
Has expired. Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Environment. Over 1 billion animals have been killed by these climate fires over summer. As many as 25,000 koalas have been killed on Kangaroo Island alone, with thousands more under threat from the loss of habitat, starvation and thirst. Over 10 million hectares of bush, forest parks and bushland have been decimated. Over 80% of the World Heritage-listed Blue Mountains has been burnt. We've already been in the midst of an extinction crisis before these summer's fires. Ecologists warn that some species may never recover. The government has already said that their $50 million is not enough. When will the government front up and fund the recovery, the restoration and the protection that our environment desperately needs? When will the government announce the money that we need right now?
The Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President, and thanks Senator Hanson-Young for part of a question at least. Mr President, these are serious issues, and the government has acted and acknowledged very much that the devastation caused by bushfires over the recent summer is not isolated to the tragic loss of life, which this chamber acknowledged on Tuesday, nor is it isolated to the loss of property or economic assets, but very much does include the loss of habitat, the harm to environment and to ecosystems. That's why the Treasurer and Minister Lee announced an initial $50 million investment to support immediate work to protect wildlife and habitat recovery, and acknowledged that this is a down payment for emergency interventions. In terms of further investment around other long-term aspects of recovery, the government's been very clear that whether it's in relation to infrastructure rebuild, support for individuals, support for businesses, support for the tourism sector, support for the environment, investment in mental health services, all of which we've taken decisions to do in the wake of these bushfires. We've indicated in all of those cases that they are initial decisions and that we will then monitor the impacts across those sectors and respond further where necessary and appropriate. Immediately, we've pursued, amongst that $50 million, funding to provide care for and rehabilitation of injured wildlife, secure viable populations of threatened species, to control feral predators, other pests and noxious weeds that are a major threat, to scientifically map and understand the true impact of these fires, and to work with landowners around protecting the precious remaining unburnt areas, allowing them to serve as arcs and to support our native plants and animals to recover. There's been extensive engagement with the conservation sector in this, and there will continue to be so.
Senator Hanson-Young, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Critical habitat for native wildlife has been destroyed, as previously outlined, but it may never recover. Will the government commit now to a moratorium on land clearing to protect the only habitat our wildlife and our precious koalas have left?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. And Senator Hanson-Young seeks in that request a sweeping policy decision, asking that it be made firmly on the run. The government has in place at a national level environmental laws that ensure that when it comes to land clearing decisions or other decisions, the federal government has a say insofar as it relates to the defined matters of national environmental importance. And those matters take into consideration requirements for habitat for endangered and threatened species. Those matters take into consideration scientific advice, but it is not the government's intent or policy for us to take over the responsibilities of states and territories when it comes to land management practices overall. The states and territories have clear responsibilities there. This parliament has determined a federal responsibility which we administer when it comes to those very particular matters of national environmental significance.
Senator Hanson-Young, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. We know these fires are linked to climate change. We know climate change gets worse by burning fossil fuels. When will the government start protecting the koala from being killed by the coal industry and the loggers?
That's right. Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, we know that the Greens like to emote a lot when it comes to these issues and these questions. The government likes to deal in facts and to work our way carefully through each of these policy matters. That's why, Mr President, we continue to make sure that as a government we deliver on our climate change targets, that we exceed those climate change targets, and our commitment is firmly to continue to seek to exceed those targets in the future. By exceeding the targets we've set, that of course means Australia makes an additional contribution to what must by necessity, as Senator Cormann has rightly outlined in answers already this week, be a global effort in terms of emissions reduction policies into the future. But in addition to those emissions reduction policies, we've been very clear out of this summer the need to deal with adaptation and other factors which I have every confidence will also be considered comprehensively by any reviews that are part of the post-bushfire season.
Senator Birmingham. Senator Chisholm.
Thanks, Mr President. My question is to the Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Cormann. Last year, the Prime Minister tabled the report by the Secretary of his department in relation to former Ministers Pyne and Bishop. Why is the Prime Minister refusing to release his Secretary's report into former Minister Mackenzie?
Leader of the Government, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Because in relation to serving ministers, these are matters that are considered by the Governance Committee of Cabinet. So these are documents that are subject, they are part of the deliberative processes of Cabinet, and as such, under the long-standing traditions, under the long-standing Westminster Conventions, under governments of both political persuasions, obviously submissions that are informing the deliberative processes of Cabinet are not released.
Senator Chisholm, a supplementary question.
Yes, Mr. President. Does the Gations report confirm engagement between the Prime Minister or his office and former Minister Mackenzie or her office in relation to the corrupt Sports for Aught scheme?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Firstly, I completely reject the description that Senator Chisholm has attached to the Sports Grants program. The Sports Grants program is a successful, popular program which has made a significant positive difference in communities right around Australia. It was administered appropriately and consistent with the guidelines. And if I can refer you to 8.1 in the guidelines, it will actually show you there that the guidelines themselves actually make very clear that there is appropriately the opportunity for discretion and for judgments to be made to deal with relevant issues. So this proposition that somehow that this has not been administered consistent with the rules and guidelines is false, and so I completely reject the proposition. Now, in relation to the other part of the question, I refer Senator Chisholm to my primary answer.
Senator Chisholm, a final supplementary question.
Yes, Mr. President. In response to the corrupt Sports for Aught scheme, Minister Chester has said that, and I quote, "There's a need to give the public confidence in the transparency of these grants are applied. The greatest deficit we have in Australian politics has nothing to do with the budget. It's a deficit between us and the people we represent." Instead of hiding Mr Gation's report, why doesn't the Prime Minister listen to Minister Chester?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We always listen to Minister Chester, of course, always. And let me say that Mr. Chester would agree that the Sports Grants program is a very popular, highly successful program that was very effectively administered, consistent with the guidelines. And I would refer you to the publicly released guidelines, which clearly stated that discretion could be exercised, and obviously that the minister would be the final decision maker. And I'm quoting, "While delivery of funding will be on a competitive basis, if after completing the assessment process emerging issues have been identified and/or there are priorities that have not been met, other projects may be considered to address these emerging issues or other forms of financial arrangements with applicants to otherwise further the objectives of the program." So, I mean, that goes to the crux of it. I mean, it was very obvious in the guidelines. I mean, there's a whole series of considerations. I mean, firstly, of course, clearly, Senator Mackenzie was concerned that Labor electorates were underrepresented in the recommendations of Sports Australia, which clearly Senator Mackenzie thought was inappropriate.
Order.
You've got to make
Senator
sure there's
Cormann,
an appropriate geographic spread.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Hughes. Senator Van.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston. Can the minister please update the Senate on how the Morrison government is supporting those affected by the bushfires?
The Minister for Families and Social Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thanks Senator Van for his question, and particularly on such an important topic as the ongoing assistance that the Australian government is providing to people who have been devastated over the summer by the terrifying bushfires that have affected so many states around this country. We all know that these fires have been absolutely devastating, and the magnitude of them has been unprecedented in terms of the crisis that it has delivered for Australia. The government of which I'm a member is absolutely committed to doing whatever it can to help families, to help businesses, to help communities, so that they can get back on their feet as quickly as possible. And that is why this government took the immediate action to set up the National Bushfire Recovery Agency and funded it with a $2 billion recovery fund to make sure that we coordinated the recovery so that the people on the ground could rebuild their communities and get on with their lives. We believe that there are tens of thousands of people who have been impacted by these terrible bushfires, and some of the initiatives that have been put in place, including making sure that there is a one-off $1,000 disaster recovery payment for every adult that was affected, And initially $400 was made available for every child, but that was increased to $800, particularly to focus on the fact that many of these fires had occurred and people had lost their homes in the lead up to the children returning to school. What we wanted to do was to make sure that we could put cash in the hands of people who were affected. And we took this decision by making sure that the Centrelink mobilised its services so that they were actually located within the regions that were impacted, whether that be through their mobile service units that drove around to the bushfire-affected communities so people could actually access it in their home area, or the many people that were actually the service teams that were mobilised into these communities.
Order, Senator Ruston. Senator Van, a supplementary question.
Minister, what support is the government providing? What immediate support is the government providing to these families and communities?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Senator Van. There have been a myriad of different ways that the community, and particularly individuals, have been supported through the assistance of this government in response to the devastating fires. There are a couple of initiatives, particularly in my area of families and social services, including the increase in the amount of emergency relief funding that was available within these regions. An additional $40 million was made available in January. And what we've done is we've sought to use existing providers who are currently on the ground in the areas, in the bushfire-affected areas, so that we could make sure that we could get the money and the assistance to these people as quickly as we could. And I particularly wanted to thank St Vincent's, Salvos and Anglicare, who have been primarily the ones who have been able to get these services out onto the ground very, very quickly. And we also made sure that we used them because locally based response and a locally based and locally driven recovery to these bushfires is absolutely essential for rebuilding our regional communities.
Senator Van, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, how is the government helping to rebuild these communities and ensure resilience over the longer term?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much. Most particularly, the most obvious thing that has emerged as we've moved into the recovery phase of these bushfires is the long-term nature of the support that's going to be required to many of these communities to enable them to rebuild, and particularly to make sure that when we do rebuild, we rebuild better. As part of that is making sure that independent advice is available to people so that they can make the right decisions as they're making decisions about what they do into their future. And that's why we made an additional $10 million available to financial counselling services. So when people are faced with the financial decisions that they need to make as they rebuild their lives, they'll be able to have that independent advice and be able to speak to people to make sure that they're making the right decisions for them and their families. Particularly, we wanted to make sure that the National Debt Recovery Helpline had increased funding, so that people, in the comfort of their own homes, were able to make a call and get that advice in person.
Order, Senator Ruston. Senator Kitching.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann. In preparing his report for the Prime Minister in relation to the application of the Statement of Ministerial Standards to former Minister Mackenzie's conduct of the Community Sport Infrastructure Program, I ask, did Mr Gagens interview the Prime Minister or any other minister to inform the preparation of his report? And if yes, who?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I'm not aware, obviously, of the processes that Mr Gaetjens has followed. You do know that you are talking, of course, about a document that was prepared to inform the deliberative processes of a cabinet subcommittee. But nevertheless, out of an abundance of helpfulness, let me take on notice whether there's anything I can helpfully provide to Senator Kitchen to assist her in relation to this. I should also say that while the report that Mr Gaetjens has prepared is subject to Cabinet confidentiality, the Secretary of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet has indicated to the Prime Minister that he does intend to make a statement over coming days setting out his findings and the basis for them.
Senator Kitching, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President.
Order.
Did Mr Gaetjens interview any of the Prime Minister's staff to inform the preparation of his report? And in particular, was the Prime Minister's Sports and Infrastructure Advisor interviewed?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think that Senator Kitchen now is obviously getting a little bit confused in relation to what was actually referred to Mr. Gaetjens for him to consider. Obviously, there was the specific issue in relation to the conflict of the at the time suspected conflict of interest, which needed to be assessed against the requirements in the Statement of Ministerial Standards, and Mr. Gaetjens has, of course, reported in relation to that. But again, in an abundance of helpfulness, because we are a very helpful, open and transparent government, I will see whether on notice I can provide you with some further information.
Senator Kitching, a final supplementary question.
I thank Senator Cormann for his helpfulness. In her statement to the Senate last night, former Minister McKenzie belatedly advised of further undeclared memberships held during her time as minister. Were these further undeclared memberships declared to Mr. Gaetjens?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will take that question on notice.
Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds. Can the minister update the Senate on how the Morrison government is addressing the serious issue of suicide in the serving and Veterans Defence personnel community?
The Minister for Defence, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank Senator McDonald for her question. And I also would like to acknowledge and thank her for the work that she does in Queensland to support veterans and veterans' employment and also their mental health. So thank you, Senator. I know that everybody in this chamber is deeply concerned about the scourge of suicide, the 3,000 deaths every year in Australia, and the particularly high rate of suicide amongst our veterans and also our serving personnel. And I know we all share the goal to do whatever we can to stop these tragedies, to safeguard the mental health and well-being of our veterans and our service personnel, and that this is an issue we all agree is an issue of national and lasting importance. As we all know in this place, it is an issue of a profoundly complex issue that deserves a comprehensive response. Over the break, as the Prime Minister has said, we listened very carefully to everybody who has an interest in this issue, and we listened to the voice of veterans and also their families. And we came to the conclusion that we wanted to do more than just hold a Royal Commission, which is why yesterday we announced a broad range of measures to assist greatly in this area. And there are three in particular that I want to mention now. First is the establishment of a national and a permanent rolling commission into veteran suicide and its preventions, which will have all of the powers of a Royal Commission. Second, to initiate an immediate and comprehensive independent review and analysis of more than 400 suicide deaths in the defence and ex-services community since 2001. And thirdly, to establish a Veterans Family Advocate who will offer a new and crucial bridge for families which will put their voices and their interests at the heart of policy making and also decision making. And I'd just like to thank the opposition in particular for their bipartisan approach to the introduction of these measures, and to all others in this chamber who shares our commitment, all of our commitment to this issue.
Order. Senator Reynolds. Senator McDonald, a supplementary question.
Can the minister outline in more detail the intended role and powers of the National Commissioner for Defence and Veteran Suicide Prevention?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you again, Mr. President, and also Senator McDonald for that question. The National Commissioner will be established with the following criteria. It will be established as an independent and a permanent body. It will be accountable to the Parliament. It will have the same powers of a Royal Commission, and that means they will be able to, whoever the Commissioner will be able to compel the production of evidence and summon witnesses. They will also be able to identify and investigate systematic issues that will inform government policy on suicide prevention and also mental health and well-being. The Commissioner will investigate individual cases of ADS and veteran suicide, working with every state and territory coroner. And more immediately, the Commissioner will commence with an independent review of historical veteran suicide cases, focusing on the impact on of their military service. Families can choose to engage if they wish, and if they do, they will be provided all support.
Senator McDonald, a final supplementary question.
Can the minister advise the Senate of the intended role of the Veterans Family Advocate?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr President. This is one of, I think, the most important initiatives that we've announced as part of this package. In addition to having a Veterans Advocate, we will now have a Veterans Family Advocate who will have a crucial role of directly engaging with family members in any which way, in any which family circumstance that veterans and ADF members have. They will also be able to advocate to help shape policy and the administrations of veterans' benefits and also support, particularly from the lens of a family member. The advocate will, as you would expect, focus on mental health and suicide prevention, and will also be expected to contribute to our understanding of the risk factors relating to the well-being of our veterans and their families, and particularly so during, as what we know is a high-risk area, through their transition from the ADF into civilian society. The advocate will sit within the Veteran Affairs portfolio through the existing repatriation.
Senator Reynolds, time for the answer has expired. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Cormann. What role did the Minister for Finance's office play in the design and implementation of the Community Sport Infrastructure Program?
The Minister for Finance, Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, in relation to the implementation, none. Obviously, neither me nor my office had visibility. There's two parts of the question. If I might answer the question, Senator Wong.
Order.
So in relation to implementation, taking that first, I had no visibility in relation to, obviously, the specific decisions in relation to specific projects. That was entirely a matter for the responsible minister, as is appropriate. In relation to the programme itself, it went through the normal deliberative processes of Cabinet. It went to ERC. It was put forward as a policy proposal by the relevant minister, and it would have gone through the normal process. That I'm obviously a member of the Expenditure Review Committee, and hence, I participated in that process, making, in relation to that budget measure in the usual way.
Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. The Independent Auditor-General's report noted that Sport Australia is not subject to the Commonwealth Grant rules and guidelines. Was it the Minister's Office's advice that the Community Sport Infrastructure Program be administered in this way? And did the Minister's Office provide this advice because Sport Australia is not subject to the Commonwealth Grant rules and guidelines?
Senator Cormann.
No, the answer to that is no. I mean, that is essentially the way the PGPA Act works. As the PGPA Act that was actually put together by the Labor Party, So in relation to these matters, as was also very clear in the explanatory memorandum to the PGPI bill at the time, you'll find that it made very clear that it was not intended to capture.
Senator Wong on a point of order.
I'm sure that the two of us are both very interested in a discussion about the PGPA Act, but that's not the question. The question that Senator Gallagher went to was whether or not the program was designed in this way in order to avoid the application of the guidelines on the advice of the Minister's Office. If you could just answer that question.
On the point of order?
No,
can I just rule on the point of order? I'm sure there are many people interested in the Act, for one. My point, I think with respect, there were two questions there. One asked about a fact, one asked about a motive on behalf of the Minister, and I think the Minister is being directly relevant to the question in the answer he is giving.
The answer to the question that Senator Wong just raised, no, there was no specific advice given in relation to circumvent, as you suggested it. Essentially, this worked in the usual way, the usual practice. The usual legal arrangement is consistent with the PGPA Act as put together by the Labor Party, that corporate entities were not covered by the Commonwealth grants rules and guidelines. But as you know, recommendation 4 of the Auditor General's report suggests that is changed, and the government has accepted that recommendation and will be acting on it.
Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Has the Minister or any current or former staff members ever seen a spreadsheet listing funding applications under the Community Sport Infrastructure Program, colour-coded and focusing on applications from marginal electorates held by the Coalition as well as electorates to be targeted by the Coalition?
Senator Cormann.
Thank you very much, Mr President. Well, I have not seen any such spreadsheet other than what has been other than what has been published in the media in recent times. I would also I would say that I cannot speak for all former staff members. I mean, I don't know what all former staff members currently are involved in. So I think that you're asking me to provide an impossible warranty, and I won't do that. I won't do that. Like my staff, my office, neither me nor my office were involved in the decision-making in relation to those projects. Well, I mean, there's actually nothing unusual in relation to this.
Order.
Minister Mackenzie was the responsible minister administering that program. I mean, that is entirely appropriate.
Senator Antic.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston. Can the Minister please update the Senate on the government's assistance that's been provided by Services Australia to the bushfire-impacted communities across Australia?
The Minister representing the Minister for Government Services, Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank Senator Antic for his question and also his interest and his support that he has provided to South Australian communities who have been so devastated by the bushfires. I know he's been out there building fences with Blaze Aid, along with many of our other colleagues, so I acknowledge that support. But particularly, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary hardship of the people of New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania and Victoria, who have been impacted by these devastating events of the last few months. And particularly we need to commend our first responders who worked absolutely tirelessly, first of all to save people's lives and protect their properties, but then to assist them as the recovery has started. And to that end, Services Australia have been out on the ground on the fire front from the minute after the fires were put out to make sure that they were providing assistance to people who had been impacted by these fires. The department has also made sure that they have been very present, not just on the ground, but making sure that they have manned their telephone lines so that when people made calls to try and find out what assistance they were able to immediately receive so that they could deal with the immediacy of losing their homes or not being able to get back to their homes, that the disaster payments hotline was being answered in extraordinarily short time, a matter of seconds for each call, so that when people rang up they did not have to wait. And in addition, in fact, since the 16th of September last year, over 130,000 calls have been answered in an average waiting time of less than 90 seconds. So particularly I want to acknowledge the staff that have been in the walk-in centres, the staff that have been on the end of the phones, and making sure that they are there to listen to people and assist people when they are obviously in a time of great need. And also to commend the Australian Defence Force and acknowledge the role of Minister Reynolds in making sure that they got the boots out in the ground to make sure that we could provide comfort to those people impacted.
Senator Ruston. Senator Antic, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given the scale of the recent bushfires, how has Services Australia adapted to assist affected Australians on the ground to ensure immediate and effective support?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Senator Antic. The ability for us to be as efficient as possible in getting disaster relief payments out on the ground was absolutely a priority of the mobilisation of Services Australia when the fires and the disasters hit. But I'd just like to update the chamber and let them know that from mid-September 2019 until February 2020, I can advise that over 75,000 claims for the Australian Government Disaster Recovery Payment have been granted, with over $89 million made available for people affected by the fires. Over 300 claims for disaster recovery allowance have been granted, and over $14 million has been paid in additional payments for children in respect to the 35,000+ children who have been in the affected areas, as well as the mobile service centres that have been out on the ground, the ADF. These teams remain in place to continue to assist people who have been impacted by the fires.
Senator Antic, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. How can Australians who still need assistance and live in fire-affected regions get help from Services Australia?
Senator Ruston.
Thank you very much. There are a number of ways in which people can get assistance from the government, but the first and easiest way for those that are in areas that have been declared disasters for the purposes of the Australian Government Disaster Relief Payments is to ring the hotline, and that number is 1802266, and people who ring that number, as long as they have the evidence that they need, will get paid almost immediately. In fact, we have heard of stories where people have put the phone down and checked their bank account and the money is already in their account. But in addition to that, Services Australia are making sure that they have a range of services available to people, including mental health support services, financial counselling services, making sure that they can deal with people who are in short-term distress, and making sure that children and their families are able to be helped through the immediate trauma of the crisis, and making sure that they're in the best position to be able to get on with rebuilding their lives.
Senator Cormann.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that further questions be placed on a notice paper.